in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where stars were few and the darkness of space pressed like a heavy, invisible blanket, a small exploratory vessel drifted through the cold emptiness. The ship, named Aurora's Reach, had been sent on a routine mission to study an uncharted sector known for its unusual electromagnetic anomalies. On board were 6 crew members, each chosen for their expertise: the captain, a seasoned space navigator with decades of experience; an engineer who had once repaired ships in the deadliest asteroid belts; a communications specialist whose skill with transmissions was unmatched; a scientist obsessed with discovering alien life; a medical officer whose calm demeanor kept everyone grounded; and a young intern who had only recently joined the crew, wide-eyed and full of nervous excitement. The mission had started like any other, a journey of curiosity and discovery, but it was about to become a fight for survival. The crew had been expecting minor challenges, small technical glitches, minor radiation bursts, and the occasional malfunction in their life support systems, but nothing in their extensive training had prepared them for the reality of the situation they now faced. The Aurora's Reach had encountered a massive, unpredictable space storm, the kind that warped instruments, interfered with navigation, and made even the most experienced crew members doubt their own senses. Instruments flickered, alarms rang intermittently, and the faint hum of the ship's engines grew louder as if struggling against the invisible pressures surrounding them. The captain gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white, and barked orders over the comms, each voice in the crew tense with anxiety. The storm, the swirling mass of charged particles and electromagnetic radiation, wreaked havoc on the vessel. Systems that had always functioned flawlessly began to fail. The engine output dropped erratically, the shields flickered and sparked under the strain, and the navigation console displayed coordinates that made no sense at all. The crew tried everything they could think of. The engineer worked tirelessly, climbing into the engine room, rewiring circuits and recalibrating systems under dangerous conditions, all while sparks flew around him. The communications officer attempted to send a distress signal, carefully encoding it to reach their home base, but every attempt failed. The storm's interference scrambled the signal, making it nearly impossible for anyone to understand the message. Inside the ship, tension was palpable. The medical officer moved among the crew, offering calm words and checking for signs of stress or panic. The young intern, though terrified, tried to help wherever possible, fetching tools and assisting in minor repairs, desperately trying to prove themselves in the midst of chaos. The scientist stared out of a small observation window at the storm, fascinated despite the danger, trying to log as much data as possible about the anomalies. Even as the ship shuddered violently under the storm's impact, it was a surreal mix of fear and awe, each crew member experiencing the delicate balance between the fragility of the situation and the beauty of the unknown forces they were witnessing. With communication channels failing and the ship's systems becoming increasingly unstable, the captain made a difficult decision. They would have to send an SOS, a distress call, to any nearby station or ship capable of rescue. The process was complicated by the storm, which distorted signals and made it impossible to target a specific recipient. Every transmission seemed to drift aimlessly through space, carried by chaotic electromagnetic waves that could reach anywhere or nowhere at all. The crew knew that sending this SOS was their only chance, but there was no guarantee it would work. Even if someone received it, there was no telling if they would arrive in time or if they would even understand the urgency of the situation. As the SOS was launched, the crew watched the small console screen with a mix of hope and dread. The message was brief and precise, containing the ship's coordinates, the nature of the emergency, and a plea for immediate assistance. They pressed the final command, and the signal, now encoded and transmitted, disappeared into the storm, carried by forces they could neither see nor control. There was a tense silence as the crew waited, listening to the ship groan and shudder around them, each second stretching longer than the last. They knew that time was running out. Supplies were limited. Oxygen levels, already affected by the damage, were slowly dropping. The engines, weakened by the storm, were struggling to maintain the ship's orientation, and the shields offered only partial protection against the ongoing bombardment of charged particles. Despite the danger, there were small moments of humanity shining through. The captain placed a reassuring hand on the young intern's shoulder, giving a brief, encouraging nod. The engineer wiped soot from his brow and gave a strained smile to the scientist, who nodded back in silent acknowledgement of the shared struggle. The medical officer quietly checked the crew's vitals and offered water and words of comfort. Each crew member, despite fear and exhaustion, kept moving, kept doing their part, knowing that giving up was not an option. Their training, their experience, and their resolve were all being tested in ways they had never imagined. What the crew did not know was that the SOS, scrambled and distorted by the storm, was traveling far beyond its intended destination. Instead of reaching the home base or nearby friendly vessels, the signal had veered into a sector inhabited by beings entirely unconnected to the United Alliance. These were the Deathworlders, a people renowned across the galaxy for their resilience, toughness, and willingness to survive in the most hostile conditions imaginable. Their world was a harsh, barren planet where only the strongest could endure. Life there had forced them to develop unparalleled skills in navigation, survival, combat, and improvisation. The Deathworlders were not ordinary beings. They were legendary in their own right, often hired as mercenaries, rescuers, or problem solvers in situations deemed impossible by the rest of the galaxy. Unbeknownst to the crew of Aurora's Reach, their scrambled SOS had found its way to these extraordinary beings. Even though the signal was garbled and incomplete, the Deathworlders could sense the urgency and danger behind it. To them, a distress call was a call to action, regardless of who it came from or where it was meant to go. They had survived countless catastrophes on their home planet, and they had honed instincts that allowed them to detect life in peril even when communication was imperfect. For them, the faint, chaotic signal was a challenge, an opportunity to prove their skills and bravery once again. Back on the Aurora's Reach, the crew had no idea who or if anyone had received their call for help. They continued to struggle against the storm, attempting repairs, monitoring life support, and preparing for the possibility that they might not survive. Fear was constant, but so was determination. Every crew member drew on memories of training, past missions, and personal reasons for being there. They thought of families waiting, colleagues who depended on them, and the hope that somehow, against all odds, help would arrive. In that tense environment, bonds formed and strengthened, forged in the crucible of shared danger. As the ship drifted through the dark expanse, the crew became more aware of how isolated they truly were. The stars outside, once symbols of wonder and exploration, now seemed cold and indifferent. The nebula's interference made the universe feel even emptier. And yet, within that emptiness, the small vessel and its crew represented life, determination, and hope. Every flicker of the console, every minor repair that held for even a few moments, was a small victory. Each member of the crew relied on one another in ways that transcended ordinary teamwork. They had become a single organism, working in perfect, if tense, harmony to survive. The captain, aware that the ship might not last another day under the storm's assault, began thinking about contingencies. If the SOS failed, what would they do? How would they ration oxygen? How could they maintain morale? These thoughts were heavy, but necessary. The crew prepared emergency measures, setting alarms, securing compartments, and ensuring that everyone understood their roles in the worst-case scenario. Every decision carried weight. Every action could mean the difference between survival and death. Despite the fear, there were moments of quiet beauty and reflection. The young intern, staring through the observation window, marveled at the colors of the storm, the violent streaks of light and shadow dancing across the black canvas of space. The scientists continued taking readings, fascinated by phenomena no one on Earth had ever seen. Even in their perilous state, the crew could not help but feel a sense of awe at the universe around them, a reminder that danger and wonder often walk hand in hand. Then, almost imperceptibly, the ship's systems gave a faint, encouraging beep, a sign that the SOS had been transmitted, at least in part. The crew could not see who might be listening, and they could not know if anyone would respond. They simply held on to the hope that someone, somewhere, would receive their call and come to help. Little did they know, far across space, the Deathworlders had picked up the signal. Though unintended, the transmission would soon set in motion a chain of events that would defy expectations, showing that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected and extraordinary sources. In that moment, amidst fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty, the crew of the Aurora's Reach held on to hope. Hope that their message had reached someone. Hope that someone would come. Hope that, even in the coldest, darkest reaches of space, they were not truly alone. This hope, fragile yet unyielding, became the invisible thread connecting them to the Deathworlders, a connection that would change both groups forever, forging a story of courage, resilience, and unexpected heroism that would echo across the galaxy for years to come. After the distress signal had been sent from the Aurora's Reach, the crew could only hope that someone would receive it. Every passing moment felt heavier than the last, as if the vastness of space itself were pressing down on them. This storm was relentless, and the minor successes of Part 1, keeping the ship partially functional, maintaining life support, and stabilizing the engines, felt like fragile victories in a battle that had no end in sight. The crew could not see beyond their small vessel, and the universe around them seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with dark voids and unpredictable hazards. Yet, within this darkness there was still hope, however faint, that someone might hear their call. Unbeknownst to them, the SOS signal had traveled far beyond their intended recipients. On a barren, desolate planet, far across the galaxy, the Deathworlders intercepted the call. Their world was notorious for its extreme conditions. Heat waves from twin suns scorched the surface by day, while nights plunged into freezing temperatures that could snap bones if a person were not careful. Violent storms swept across the planet, capable of erasing entire settlements in hours. Even in such a hostile environment, the Deathworlders thrived. Their survival skills were unmatched, and their culture revolved around endurance, resourcefulness, and courage in the face of impossible odds. The Deathworlders had received distorted versions of countless messages over the years. Their technology and instincts allowed them to detect the urgency of a call for help, even if the details were garbled or incomplete. When the SOS from the Aurora's reach arrived, they immediately recognized its importance. Though the transmission had strayed far from its intended path, the raw energy and desperation in the signal told them everything they needed to know. Someone was in danger, and their skills could make the difference between life and death. Within moments, the planet's leaders convened a council. Pilots, strategists, engineers, and warriors were summoned, all debating how to respond to a mission that, by conventional standards, seemed impossible. Some argued that the SOS might be a trick, a trap set to lure rescuers into danger. Others insisted that they had a moral duty to act, regardless of the risk or uncertainty. Meanwhile, back on the Aurora's reach, the crew faced mounting challenges. Life support systems continued to degrade, oxygen levels fluctuating unpredictably. The crew rationed what supplies they had, knowing that even the smallest mistake could mean disaster. The engineer worked relentlessly, repairing damaged circuits, reinforcing failing shields, and improvising with spare parts in ways no one had ever been trained to do. The sparks flew from open panels, and the acrid smell of overheating machinery filled the air, but he persisted, knowing that every small repair could prolong their survival. The scientist, fascinated and terrified at the same time, attempted to log data about the electromagnetic storm surrounding them. Despite the danger, she could not resist recording the strange energy fluctuations, the unique particles that danced through the ship, and the anomalies that defied known physics. Every moment of observation carried a risk. One wrong step could mean injury or worse, but the crew's shared understanding was that knowledge was as important as survival. The communications officer continued attempting to maintain contact, scanning frequencies repeatedly in the hope that some station or ship might respond. Each failed attempt weighed heavily on him, knowing that with every passing minute, their chances of rescue diminished. Tension among the crew was rising. The young intern, barely out of training, struggled to stay calm while assisting the engineer in monitoring systems. Despite the fear, he refused to remain idle. Each task he performed, no matter how small, helped the crew maintain some semblance of order amidst the chaos. The medical officer worked tirelessly to maintain the mental and physical well-being of the team. He recognized that fear and stress could be as deadly as the storm itself. So he offered words of encouragement, helped stabilize the engineer's exhaustion, and reminded the captain and crew that they had survived worse conditions before. As the ship continued drifting through the storm, the crew's situation grew increasingly dire. The engines were no longer fully responsive, and navigation became nearly impossible. Even a small mistake could push them into an asteroid field, a gravity well, or directly into the storm's deadliest regions. Each crew member was hyper-aware of the stakes. Mistakes were not allowed. Every decision was weighed carefully, and every action was deliberate. The crew became a tightly coordinated unit, moving almost instinctively, anticipating one another's needs and responses. Despite the exhaustion, fear, and uncertainty, their training and experience shone through in every coordinated effort to stabilize the vessel on the death. Preparations were underway for a daring rescue. The planet's pilots began inspecting their ships, ensuring that engines, shields, and weapon systems were functioning at maximum capacity. Navigators plotted the quickest and safest route, using experience and intuition to avoid areas of space known for hazards. Engineers checked and rechecked every system, making sure their vessels could withstand the journey. Warriors trained in zero-gravity combat and boarding tactics honed their skills, anticipating the possibility that the rescue would require more than just piloting precision. The Council of Deathworlders debated the risks, but ultimately, the decision was unanimous. They would go. The chance to save lives, even those of strangers, outweighed any danger or uncertainty. The journey itself posed immense challenges. The Deathworlders had to navigate through asteroid fields that could easily destroy a vessel, dodge regions of high radiation, and avoid pirate activity notorious in the sector. Each pilot relied on instincts developed through years of surviving extreme conditions on their home planet. They calculated trajectories with precision, adjusted speeds to account for anomalies, and used unconventional maneuvers to bypass hazards. The engineers ensured that shields and hulls could withstand impacts that would destroy ordinary vessels, while the warriors prepared to board or defend if the mission went awry. Every member of the team knew that failure was not an option, and their cohesion and determination were unmatched. Back on the Aurora's reach, the crew continued their fight for survival. Days or perhaps only hours, the crew could not be sure, were spent performing maintenance, monitoring systems, and attempting to ration remaining supplies. The storm showed no signs of abating. The captain, despite his growing exhaustion, maintained authority and focus, making critical decisions and encouraging the crew to persevere. He reminded them that hope could be found even in the most hopeless situations, and that unity and determination might be their only path to survival. As the SOS began to take effect, though, the crew did not yet realize it. Storm itself continued to batter the vessel. Electrical sparks arced from malfunctioning systems. Alarms screamed intermittently, and the constant vibration of the engines and hull reminded the crew that their situation was precarious. Every minor repair and improvisation was a victory. Every stabilizing measure, every calculation, every ration carefully distributed, brought them a step closer to survival. And though the crew could not see it, somewhere far away, beings as tough and resourceful as anyone in the galaxy were preparing to respond to their call. The tension was not just technical, it was emotional. Each crew member wrestled with fear, hope, and responsibility. The young intern struggled to reconcile excitement for space exploration with the terror of imminent danger. The engineer battled exhaustion and frustration, knowing that a single failure could end everything. The scientist balanced curiosity with self-preservation, unable to stop her observations despite the risks. The medical officer, constantly vigilant, faced the challenge of keeping morale intact while performing life-saving care. And the captain carried the heaviest burden, responsible for every life aboard the vessel, aware that a single misstep could doom them all. This phase, the rising challenge, was more than just technical difficulty. It was a test of endurance, courage, and human spirit. The crew had to navigate the unknown, make life-or-death decisions, and maintain hope in a situation where hope seemed nearly impossible. They were isolated, vulnerable, and facing forces far beyond their control. Yet through determination, teamwork, and resilience, they kept moving forward. Every second counted, and every choice had consequences. And far away, the Deathworlders prepared to act, unaware of the crew's identities or exact location. Yet instinctively knowing that action was required, the stage was set for a convergence of skill, courage, and destiny, a moment when two worlds, one of desperation and one of unparalleled survival ability, would collide. The rising challenge was not just about survival against a storm or the limitations of the ship. It was about the unknown, the unpredictable, and the test of resolve that would define both the stranded crew and the Deathworlders who were on their way. In this phase, the story emphasized the power of determination in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. It highlighted how ordinary beings, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, could push beyond limits, adapt to extreme challenges, and keep hope alive even in isolation. It also set the foundation for the next critical phase, where the stakes would rise even higher, and the unexpected arrival of the Deathworlders would prove that sometimes help comes from the most unlikely sources, in ways no one could predict. The situation aboard the Aurora's Reach had reached a critical point. The once manageable storm that had battered the ship for days had intensified beyond anything the crew had experienced. Electrical surges pulsed through the hull, alarms screamed continuously, and the ship shuddered violently with every blast of charged particles. The engines, already weakened, now struggled to maintain even the slightest maneuvering ability. Each second that passed felt like an eternity as the crew worked tirelessly to keep the vessel from being torn apart. The sense of urgency had escalated to a level that pressed on every nerve and muscle. Every member of the crew felt the growing weight of mortality. Captain Reynolds, the leader of the mission, could feel the tension coiling in his chest like a living thing. He was exhausted, sleep-deprived, and constantly aware of the fragility of their situation. Every decision carried immense consequences. The storm seemed to have a mind of its own, lashing unpredictably and punishing every miscalculation. He barked orders in a steady, commanding voice, but even his composure could not hide the gnawing fear that they might not survive the night. The crew responded with precision and determination, each person performing their role with meticulous care. Despite fatigue and fear, the team had developed a rhythm of fragile balance that allowed them to keep fighting for their lives. The ship's sensors, already damaged, began to fail completely. The navigation console, which had once been a reliable guide through the vast emptiness of space, now displayed coordinates that were incoherent. The crew could no longer rely on technology to guide them. Instinct and experience became their only tools. The engineer, Miguel, crawled into the engine compartment, sparks flying around him as he rewired failing circuits and improvised repairs using whatever spare parts he could find. His hands were raw, his uniform scorched in places, but he refused to stop. He knew that even the smallest malfunction could cascade into catastrophic failure, ending all chances of survival. Meanwhile, the communications officer, Lena, frantically worked to stabilize transmissions. The SOS they had sent earlier had gone far off course, and she could not confirm whether anyone had received it. Each attempt to contact home base failed, leaving her frustrated and anxious. She felt the desperation of every crew member, understanding that without help their chances were dwindling rapidly. Each failed signal was a blow to morale, but she forced herself to continue, holding on to the slim hope that someone, somewhere, would hear their call and respond. The young intern Taro was terrified. His hands shook as he assisted Miguel with repairs, constantly aware of the sparks flying dangerously close to exposed wiring. He had joined the mission full of excitement and curiosity, eager to explore the stars and witness phenomena no one else had seen. But now, he was confronted with the harsh reality of space. The reality that life could be taken in an instant and that survival demanded courage, quick thinking, and determination far beyond anything he had ever imagined. Despite the fear, he continued, finding a strength within himself he did not know existed. Every small task he completed, every tool he handed to Miguel, it felt like a victory against the overwhelming odds. The scientist, Dr. Kira Patel, remained glued to the observation window, her fascination with the electromagnetic storm undiminished even by the danger. The storm itself was unlike anything recorded in human history, swirling arcs of energy, waves of charged particles that seemed to bend and twist in impossible patterns. While others saw chaos and destruction, she saw opportunity for discovery. Her data logs grew with incredible speed, documenting the anomalies she observed. But the beauty of her research could not mask the fear. The ship's shudders and groans reminded everyone that they were still in grave danger. The medical officer, Lieutenant Soren, moved constantly among the crew, monitoring vitals, offering words of encouragement, and performing minor treatments for injuries sustained during the storm. Sparks from exposed wires had scorched a few hands, and the stress of continuous alarm signals was taking a toll on their mental well-being. Soren knew that if morale broke, even partially, it could cost them the entire mission. He reinforced their determination through constant presence, calm advice, and quiet reassurances. In the moments when words failed, his steady gaze reminded them all to continue fighting. As the crew struggled far across the galaxy, the Deathworlders were closing in. Their vessels, adapted to extreme conditions on their home planet, navigated dangerous asteroid fields, high radiation zones, and regions notorious for pirates with incredible precision. Their pilots had honed instincts, sharpened by years surviving in the deadliest environments imaginable. The engineering teams on their ships monitored every system, recalibrating shields and hull strength in real time to withstand impacts that would have destroyed ordinary vessels. Every member of the Deathworlders team knew that a single mistake could doom the mission, yet none wavered. Their society had trained them for exactly these impossible scenario situations where only ingenuity, courage, and endurance could ensure survival. The journey was fraught with tension and near misses. A rogue asteroid narrowly missed one of the Deathworlder ships, scraping the hull and leaving a small trail of debris in its wake. Radiation bursts threatened navigation systems, forcing pilots to rely on instinct and manual calculations. Even so, the Deathworlders advanced relentlessly, refusing to turn back. For them, hesitation was not an option. The mission demanded absolute focus and unwavering resolve. The uncertainty of the SOS, the fact that it had not come from anyone they knew or expected, only added to the intensity. Yet their culture, forged in adversity, allowed them to embrace risk without hesitation. Back on the Aurora's Reach, the crew's situation became even more perilous. The engines failed entirely, leaving the ship adrift in a region of unstable gravitational forces. Without propulsion, they were at the mercy of the storm, which battered the hull with relentless energy. Electrical sparks shot across the control panels, and alarms blared without pause. Every system they had been relying on was now compromised. The captain realized that if they did not receive help soon, there would be no recovery. Panic began to creep into the crew's actions. Minor mistakes could have catastrophic consequences. In the midst of this chaos, a faint glimmer of hope appeared. One of the sensors, damaged but still functional, detected a distant energy signature approaching their position. At first, the crew could not identify it, unsure if it was another hazard or an actual vessel. As the signature grew closer, it became clear that someone or something was coming to their aid. The crew's exhaustion and fear momentarily gave way to cautious optimism. Could it be that someone had received their SOS after all? Could help be arriving in time to save them from certain disaster? The Deathworlders had finally arrived at the edge of the storm. Their approach was daring and precise, demonstrating the skills that had earned them legendary status across the galaxy. Using reinforced ships and instinctive piloting, they navigated the outer edges of the storm, carefully avoiding the worst of the turbulence. Their shields absorbed impacts that would have torn ordinary vessels apart, and their experienced crews coordinated seamlessly, anticipating each hazard and reacting before danger could manifest. Even the pirates that had been patrolling the sector were kept at bay, intimidated by the Deathworlders' reputation and tactical prowess. As they closed in, the crew aboard the Aurora's Reach saw figures moving outside the ship, silhouetted against the chaotic flashes of the storm. Relief washed over them in a wave so intense it was almost overwhelming. The sense of imminent doom that had dominated the previous hours began to lift, replaced by a mixture of awe, gratitude, and disbelief. The Deathworlders were here, arriving at the exact moment when hope seemed most fragile. The crew could not yet communicate effectively with their rescuers, but their presence alone was enough to restore morale and ignite a renewed determination to survive until contact could be made at the critical moment. The two forces, one desperate and vulnerable, the other prepared and fearless, finally converged. The Deathworlders carefully maneuvered their ships alongside the Aurora's Reach, braving the worst of the storm to stabilize the situation. Boarding operations were prepared, should they be necessary, with ropes, magnetic grappling lines, and emergency protocols all in place. The Aurora's Reach shuddered violently as the storm's energy collided with the stabilizing shields of the Deathworlder vessels. Sparks flew, alarms screamed, and the crew braced themselves for the final tense moments of the encounter. Captain Reynolds, exhausted but resolute, took a deep breath and coordinated his crew. Every hand had a role, every person a task, as they prepared for first contact. The young intern's hands trembled with excitement and fear. Miguel worked with precision to align docking clamps. Lena strained to maintain communications. Dr. Patel recorded the moment with scientific precision, even amid the life-threatening chaos. And Lieutenant Soren continued to monitor and calm the crew, ensuring no one lost focus. Every second mattered. Finally, with the expertise and courage of the Deathworlders guiding them, the Aurora's reach was stabilized enough to allow direct rescue efforts. The storm raged around them, but the worst of the danger was being mitigated. The crew realized that their salvation had arrived, not as an accident of chance, but as a result of determination, skill, and the willingness of the Deathworlders to risk everything to save lives. What had begun as a seemingly hopeless situation was now entering a turning point, a critical moment that would determine whether everyone survived or succumbed to the storm. This phase, the escalation and critical moment, to emphasize the intense pressure, near disaster, and the miraculous timing of the rescue, it highlighted the desperation, courage, and skill of both the stranded crew and their rescuers, building suspense and tension that would eventually lead to resolution. The story underscored the power of resilience, the unpredictability of danger, and the extraordinary acts of bravery that emerge when survival is on the line. The moment had arrived. After days of relentless struggle, danger, and uncertainty, the crew of the Aurora's Reach finally found themselves face to face with the rescuers who had come for them, the Deathworlders. These beings, hardened by their planet's extreme conditions and honed through a lifetime of survival against impossible odds, were unlike anyone the crew had ever seen. Their presence was imposing yet reassuring, a living demonstration of skill, courage, and determination. The storm still raged around them, battering the ship and sending arcs of energy across the hull. But somehow, amidst the chaos, order had arrived. The crew could hardly believe their eyes. They had expected no one, or at best, a delayed rescue that might never come. Instead, these legendary figures had appeared at the precise moment when survival seemed almost impossible. The Deathworlders began their operations with methodical precision. They approached the Aurora's Reach with reinforced ships, braving the worst of the storm to position themselves alongside the crippled vessel. Magnetic docking lines were fired and latched onto the hull, securing a fragile connection that allowed the crew to prepare for transfer. Every move was calculated, executed with calm confidence despite the raging elements. Sparks flew as the docking lines connected, electricity arcing from the storm's interference. But the Deathworlders remained undeterred. Their movements were deliberate, purposeful, and practice proof of years of training in environments far deadlier than anything the crew had ever faced. Inside the ship, the crew worked frantically to prepare for evacuation. Captain Reynolds coordinated with Miguel, the engineer, ensuring that the engines were stable enough for a brief transfer. Lena, the communications officer, maintained sporadic contact with the Deathworlders, struggling to convey their condition through the interference of the storm. Dr. Patel, the scientist, took careful observations of the process, fascinated by the techniques the Deathworlders employed and the efficiency with which they navigated danger. Lieutenant Soren, the medical officer, ensured that everyone was physically and mentally ready to move, and the young intern Taro, despite fear and exhaustion, followed instructions with precision, knowing that a single mistake could be fatal. The storm continued to roar outside, a cacophony of wind, debris, and energy arcs. But the Deathworlders' presence brought a sense of controlled chaos. They moved with purpose, boarding the Aurora's Reach with specialized equipment designed for rapid extraction. Magnetic boots allowed them to anchor securely despite the ship's erratic movement, and reinforced suits protected them from sparks and stray electrical discharges. They quickly assessed the condition of the crew, prioritizing those most at risk while maintaining a systematic approach. Every movement, every decision, displayed their mastery of crisis situations. For the crew, who had spent days teetering on the edge of despair, this level of professionalism and skill was both awe-inspiring and reassuring. As the first members of the crew were guided onto the Deathworlders ships, the relief was palpable. Each step away from the Aurora's Reach felt like a victory over the relentless forces that had threatened their lives. The crew had been adrift, powerless against the storm, and facing the slow decay of their ship's systems. Now, under the guidance of these extraordinary rescuers, they were beginning to reclaim agency over their fate. Taro, gripping a support line tightly, felt the first true sense of safety he had experienced since the storm began. Miguel followed, carrying critical equipment, while Captain Reynolds and the others maintained a close, careful coordination with their rescuers. The process of evacuation was not simple. The storm's energy continued to interfere with electronics, and debris constantly threatened to damage the ships. Every step of the operation required vigilance and quick reactions. Yet the Deathworlders moved with calm efficiency, neutralizing hazards and ensuring that each crew member could transition safely. Their teamwork was flawless, with individuals anticipating each other's actions and responding instantly to unexpected changes. For the crew of the Aurora's Reach, witnessing this level of coordination was both reassuring and humbling. It was as if they had been thrust into a world where danger was constant, yet every move was a demonstration of mastery over it. Once all crew members were aboard the Deathworlder vessels, the immediate danger began to diminish. The ships, designed to withstand extreme environments, provided a sanctuary from the storm's relentless assault. Systems stabilized, shields absorbed the brunt of the storm's energy, and for the first time in days, the crew could breathe without the constant fear of immediate destruction. Relief washed over them, mingled with lingering anxiety. They had survived the worst of the storm, but the memory of the peril they had endured remained vivid. Every crew member felt the weight of exhaustion, yet beneath it, there was a profound sense of gratitude and admiration for the beings who had come to their aid. The journey back from the storm was still dangerous, but the Deathworlder's expertise ensured a level of safety that the Aurora's Reach could never have provided on its own. Their navigation was precise, anticipating turbulence and energy fluctuations with intuitive skill. Shields were adjusted dynamically to absorb the worst impacts, and hull integrity was constantly monitored and reinforced. The crew, now passengers rather than operators, could only marvel at the capabilities of their rescuers. Even the scientist, Dr. Patel, could not help but be fascinated by the techniques and equipment employed, noting details for future study while still absorbing the gravity of their survival. During the journey, interaction between the crew and Deathworlders began. Words were sparse at first, hindered by the storm's interference and the technical demands of the rescue, but gradually, as systems stabilized, communication improved. The crew learned about the Deathworlders' culture, their history of survival on an unforgiving planet, and the skills that allowed them to thrive where most others could not. Respect grew quickly, founded on shared experience and the unspoken bond formed in life-threatening situations. The Deathworlders in turn learned about the crew's mission, the nature of their exploratory work, and the circumstances that had led to their peril. Both sides recognized the value and courage of the other, establishing a connection that went beyond simple gratitude. Captain Reynolds, despite exhaustion, took the time to formally acknowledge the Deathworlders' heroism. He spoke with measured words, expressing deep appreciation for the precision, skill, and courage demonstrated during the rescue. Miguel and Taro, still recovering from physical exertion, echoed these sentiments, while Dr. Patel documented every detail. Even Lieutenant Soren, who had maintained a focus on the crew's immediate well-being, noted the incredible professionalism and bravery of the rescuers. The crew understood that their survival had depended entirely on these extraordinary beings, whose presence had turned a near-certain tragedy into an astounding success. As the storm gradually subsided behind them, the rescued crew could finally begin to relax. They observed the Deathworlders in action, noting how they maintained vigilance even in calmer conditions. Shields were constantly monitored, communication channels kept open, and the ships were prepared to respond instantly to any new threats. For the crew, it was a lesson in preparedness, skill, and the level of dedication required to survive in the harshest environments. They had been rescued, yes, but they also witnessed firsthand the discipline and capability that had made such a rescue possible. By the time the vessels reached a safer sector of space, where energy readings normalized and the storm's effects dissipated, the crew of the Aurora's Reach had undergone a profound transformation. Fear and desperation, which had dominated their experience for days, were replaced by awe and respect. They had faced the edge of survival and emerged victorious, thanks to the courage, skill, and determination of the Deathworlders. The crew reflected on the fragility of life in space and the incredible importance of training, instinct, and courage. They had learned that even when circumstances seemed hopeless, determination and expertise could change the outcome. The rescue operation was more than a technical achievement. It was a testament to the values of bravery, loyalty, and the instinct to act in the face of danger. The Deathworlders demonstrated that true skill is not measured merely by survival but by the ability to extend survival to others, even at great risk. Every crew member recognized that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a combination of timing, expertise, and courage that few could ever replicate. It was a moment that would remain vivid in their memories for the rest of their lives. As the Deathworlders guided the Aurora's Reach crew back to a friendly space station, the mood shifted from relief to reflection. Conversations, though still cautious, began to touch on the lessons learned. The crew understood that survival in space was as much about psychological resilience as it was about technology. The Deathworlders had exemplified both, combining calm focus under pressure with unparalleled technical and physical skill. Even the young intern, Taro, began to see himself differently, not just as a trainee or observer, but as someone who had endured and contributed under life-threatening conditions. The resolution of this phase also highlighted the unpredictability of rescue and survival. The crew had sent their SOS without knowing who would receive it, and the fact that it reached beings entirely unrelated to their mission was a powerful reminder of the randomness and interconnectedness of the universe. Sometimes, help comes from unexpected sources, and the right combination of skill, courage, and timing can turn disaster into salvation. The crew realized that while they had prepared as best they could, it was the Deathworlders' expertise and willingness to act that had ultimately determined the outcome. By the time the rescue operation was complete, and the crew safely aboard the Deathworlders ships, the immediate threat of the storm was behind them. They could finally breathe, rest, and recover from the ordeal. Yet the lessons of the crisis remained. Every crew member understood the value of vigilance, preparation, and the extraordinary courage required to act decisively when lives are on the line. The rescue had not only saved them physically but had expanded their understanding of what is possible when skill, determination, and bravery intersect. In the end, the resolution of this harrowing ordeal was both practical and emotional. The crew had survived, yes, but more importantly, they had witnessed a display of heroism and capability that few could ever imagine. The Deathworlders had turned what seemed like certain death into a triumph of survival, coordination, and courage. For the Aurora's Reach crew, this experience would become a defining moment, a story of hope, bravery, and the remarkable power of those willing to face impossible odds to save others. After the immediate danger of the storm had passed and the Aurora's Reach crew had been safely rescued by the Death, a profound sense of relief and reflection settled over everyone involved. The chaos and terror of the preceding days had left them physically exhausted, mentally drained, and emotionally raw, but it also gave rise to a powerful mixture of gratitude, awe, and introspection. For the crew, this was a moment to process not only their survival but also the extraordinary forces and individuals that had made it possible. Each member had been forever changed by the experience, carrying lessons and memories that would linger long after the danger had faded. Captain Reynolds was the first to truly embrace the reality of their survival. He had been responsible for every life aboard the ship, had faced the impossible storm, and had made countless critical decisions in the span of days that felt like weeks. The sight of the Deathworlders unflinching, capable, and unwavering resonated deeply with him. He realized that while leadership and training had kept the crew functional, it had been the Deathworlders' intervention that had turned survival from a fragile possibility into reality. As he watched the rescuers guide his crew through deep medical checks and system stabilization, he could not help but feel immense respect for their courage, precision, and dedication. Miguel, the engineer, found himself reflecting on the countless hours spent crawling through sparking engine rooms, rerouting circuits, and holding together failing systems with improvised solutions. Every effort he had made, every risk he had taken, was amplified by the realization that his survival had depended on teamwork both within his own crew and with the Deathworlders. He marveled at their ability to operate under pressure, to anticipate hazards, and to act decisively without hesitation. The juxtaposition of human improvisation and alien expertise gave him a new perspective on resilience and problem-solving, reinforcing the value of preparation, experience, and calm focus under extreme conditions. Lena, the communications officer, had spent much of the ordeal frustrated by failed transmissions, interference, and uncertainty. Now, as she debriefed with the Deathworlders, she began to see the importance of perspective. While her SOS had gone astray, it had reached the right beings once capable of taking decisive action. She marveled at the way the Deathworlders interpreted incomplete information, acted with precision, and made life-saving decisions despite uncertainty. It was a lesson in trust, intuition, and the extraordinary power of instinct honed through experience. The realization that hope can sometimes arrive in unexpected forms left a lasting impression on her. Dr. Kira Patel, the scientist, had initially been focused on the storm and the anomalies it presented. But in the aftermath, she began to process the human and social dimensions of the ordeal. She had observed courage, collaboration, and skill in ways that no textbook or research could fully capture. She noted how the Deathworlders' culture, forged through extreme environmental challenges, had created a society where adaptability, bravery, and mutual reliance were paramount. For her, the experience was a revelation. The survival of life, whether human or alien, depended not only on technology or intellect but on character, instinct, and the willingness to act in the face of overwhelming odds. Lieutenant Soren, the medical officer, focused on the psychological and emotional effects of the experience. The crew had endured near constant stress, fear, and uncertainty, yet they had emerged relatively intact thanks to discipline, training, and the presence of extraordinary rescuers. He reflected on how human resilience can be amplified when combined with guidance from those with experience and skill. Watching the crew recover and share gratitude with the Deathworlders reinforced his belief in the importance of leadership, empathy, and mental fortitude. He realized that survival in extreme conditions was as much about morale and trust as it was about physical endurance. The young intern had arrived on the mission wide-eyed and full of excitement, expecting adventure and discovery. He had not anticipated life-threatening danger. And yet, in the crucible of crisis, he had discovered a reservoir of courage and capability within himself. Every instruction he had followed, every task he had performed under stress, had contributed to his survival and to the crew's ability to maintain function until rescue arrived. The experience left him with a profound sense of personal growth and a newfound understanding of what it means to act responsibly in the face of danger. More importantly, he learned to appreciate the value of teamwork, mentorship, and guidance from those who had faced impossible challenges before. The Deathworlders themselves remained remarkably composed, though subtle signs of satisfaction could be seen in their expressions. They had undertaken a mission that most others would have deemed suicidal, yet they had executed it flawlessly. Their culture, built on surviving the deadliest conditions imaginable, had trained them to respond decisively to danger, no matter the circumstances. For them, this rescue was both routine and extraordinary, a demonstration of skill, courage, and the principles that governed their society. Their calm efficiency and unwavering focus had ensured the crew's survival, reinforcing their reputation across the galaxy as unparalleled survivors and heroic figures. As the ships carried the crew to a safer sector of space, conversations began to turn to reflection. The crew realized that survival often relies on more than preparation or skill. It also requires timing, luck, and the courage of others willing to intervene at the right moment. The SOS, though initially misdirected, had reached beings uniquely equipped to respond, highlighting the unpredictable nature of hope and assistance. It became clear that while human ingenuity and resilience were crucial, the intervention of extraordinary allies could redefine outcomes in ways that ordinary efforts could not achieve. The experience also emphasized the interconnectedness of life and action. The crew understood that, in the vastness of space, events are rarely isolated. One signal, even misdirected, can set off a chain reaction that changes everything. The Deathworlders' willingness to act, their readiness to face extreme danger, and their exceptional skill had created a lifeline that the crew could not have achieved alone. This realization instilled a deep sense of humility, as well as gratitude, as the crew recognized that their survival had depended on forces far beyond their immediate control. That as the immediate dangers faded, the crew began to discuss lessons learned and ways to improve their preparedness for future missions. Captain Reynolds emphasized the importance of clear communication, redundant systems, and contingency planning, while also acknowledging that even the best plans could be aided by unexpected help. Miguel reflected on technical improvisation and the need to maintain composure under extreme stress. Lena focused on the role of adaptability in communication, recognizing that clarity and flexibility can be as vital as skill. Dr. Patel considered the importance of understanding cultures and skill sets that differ from their own, while Lieutenant Soren emphasized resilience, mental fortitude, and the human element of survival. Taro, though young and inexperienced, contributed observations born from first-hand experience of extreme fear and responsibility. The impact of the rescue extended beyond practical lessons. The crew and the Deathworlders formed bonds rooted in shared experience and mutual respect. Though they came from entirely different worlds with distinct cultures, the shared challenge created a connection that transcended language, species, and experience. They had faced the edge of survival together, and in doing so, had built trust and understanding that would persist long after the storm had passed. This emotional resonance left a lasting imprint on everyone involved, reinforcing the idea that cooperation, courage, and willingness to act are universal values, no matter one's background or origin. As the crew prepared to return to a friendly space station, they reflected on the unpredictability of life and the importance of being prepared to act when called upon. The Deathworlders' example illustrated that extraordinary skills and experience can change outcomes in ways that seem impossible. For the crew, the experience reinforced the significance of training, teamwork, and courage, while also highlighting the unpredictable nature of the universe. They realized that while preparation and skill are crucial, the right combination of help, timing, and determination can turn a desperate situation into survival and even triumph. Long after the crew was safely transported, the story of the rescue began to circulate across space stations, research outposts, and communication networks. Tales of the misdirected SOS, the relentless storm, and the legendary Deathworlders reached far and wide, inspiring awe and admiration. The crew shared their story with colleagues, documenting not only the technical details but also the human aspects. The fear, courage, resilience, and mutual reliance that had made survival possible. The tale became a testament to the power of bravery, skill, and the unexpected ways help can arrive when it is needed most. In private moments, the crew reflected on how fragile and precious life can be, especially in the unforgiving expanse of space. They recognized that even the smallest actions, sending a message, making a repair, maintaining focus under stress, can have life-saving consequences. The experience also reinforced the idea that survival is never just an individual effort. It is the culmination of teamwork, trust, and the courage of others willing to step into danger. This understanding deepened their appreciation for both their own contributions and the extraordinary efforts of the Deathworlders who had saved them. For the Deathworlders, the mission was a reaffirmation of their culture and values. They had risked themselves to save others, demonstrating that true skill and courage are measured not only by one's own survival but by the ability to protect and preserve the lives of others. The mission reinforced their reputation as heroes across the galaxy, figures who answered calls for help, no matter how impossible, and who thrived where others could not. Their presence in the story became a symbol of hope and resilience, showing that even in the most dire circumstances, there are those willing to act decisively to preserve life. As the rescued crew finally approached a friendly space station, they could see the lights of civilization and safety in the distance. Relief washed over them, mingled with reflection on the ordeal they had endured. They had faced the edge of survival and come through it alive, changed, and profoundly aware of the extraordinary forces that had intervened. The storm was behind them, but the lessons, memories, and bonds formed during the rescue would remain forever. They had learned that courage, skill, and resilience are amplified when combined with timely help, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes arrive from unexpected places. In the end, the aftermath of the rescue was not only about survival but about growth, understanding, and appreciation for the extraordinary courage displayed by both crew and rescuers. The experience left everyone with a deeper respect for the challenges of space, the importance of preparedness, and the remarkable potential of beings willing to risk everything for others. It became a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of human and alien courage, a story that would inspire all who heard it, reminding them that even in the darkest, most dangerous corners of the universe, help can arrive in the most extraordinary and unexpected ways.